This is Steve, and I'm here with Dr. Deb McMahan, who is the Commissioner for the Allen County Fort Wayne Allen County Health Department, if I can get it out
It's a
there.
mouthful.
Yes, it is. We appreciate your time today.
Sure.
We wanted to talk a little bit about K2.
Mm-hmm.
That's been on the city's horizon, New Haven, and probably soon to be the county as well. What exactly is K2?
Well, K2 is a synthetic cannabinoid it's a designer drug that is then added to other products like incense. It's sprayed on there with other chemicals. We aren't really sure what all they're using. It's sprayed onto incense, and then people can smoke it, or I've heard some people are eating it. I find that hard to believe, but smoking it primarily to obtain the same sort of euphoria that you get with marijuana.
Mm-hmm. And one of the key things is we're not sure what's in it.
Right.
It could be just about anything.
Well, it's an unregulated product, and the difficulty that you have with unregulated products from my perspective is that you don't know. There has to be no official listing of ingredients or percentages or anything on the package, so that's one thing. You really don't know what you're getting. And then the other thing is there's no safety mechanisms or protocols for monitoring the product in terms of production. I mean, and just look at all the recalls we have, like just recently with the eggs with salmonella. Well, that's with a regulated product. That's because there are safety mechanisms built into the production and development of that product that then can notify people when there is a safety risk, and then the product can be recalled. Well, if something's not regulated, I can't imagine they're going to spend a whole lot of money on that whole safety and monitoring procedure. So not only do you not know what's in it, and there's no regulation to ensure that the right components are in there, but then there's no safety mechanism in place, or there doesn't need to be one that's in place. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to be concerned about any unregulated product.
Mm-hmm. And one of the dangers of this also is especially is kind of available to teenagers as well. And I know that one of the things that you talked about before City Council was the effects of drugs on a developing brain. Would you talk a little bit more about that?
You know, it's so interesting because I think even in medicine, you know, as of maybe 10 years ago, we thought everything was hard and fast. By the time you were 3 years old, man, it was set in stone what your intellectual capacity was going to be, and, you know, pretty much your future was set by then. But because of all of the imaging techniques we've developed in diagnostic medicine, we now have the ability to actually see function, not just form. So we can now not just image your brain, but we can actually see it working. And as a result of that, a lot of different studies have been done to really look at the dynamic state of the brain during thinking, and all sorts of different, with the impact of different chemicals in thinking, and all sorts of different studies have been done, really looking more at the function of the brain. As a result, what we realize now is that the reason your teenagers are acting a certain way or acting like they don't have a clue is because physiologically they don't. Their brain doesn't really, the most important part of the brain that's involved in sort of, they call it the CEO of the brain, in terms of executive function of judgment, predicting consequences, really the more advanced thinking doesn't really physiologically mature until you're about 25. Now that doesn't mean it's completely mature and then at 25 it flips a switch. It's certainly obviously a progression over those years. But that explains why when kids, they don't really have the judgment to predict, boy, if I smoke all of this and then go to school, for example, I may not do well or pay attention in class. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is when something is developing, it's very vulnerable to the toxic effects of anything. And so we know that kids who drink at an early age, we know that kids that smoke pot at an early age, there are physiologic changes in their brain that they may not recover from. The size of a certain area of their brain called the hippocampus, for example, in alcohol, if they drink at a very early age, that never grows to the full size that it would in a non-drinking young adult. So, you know that these people are not only more likely not to make good judgments, just routinely, then you cloud that with something that affects your ability to think clearly. And then you also add to that the fact that they could actually be causing permanent physiologic or structural damage in their brain. It's all a very compelling reason to really try and make this not available to young people.
Mm-hmm. If a parent suspects issues with K2 or alcohol or any kind of drugs, what resources are available for them?
Well, there are a lot of good resources in our community in terms of, first of all, just becoming aware of issues. I was just talking with the CEO of McMillan Health Education Center. They now have programs that help parents get some, I would call, talking points to understand some of these issues when it comes to children and drugs or children and other issues. So I would look for those kind of resources. But the biggest thing I think you can do is talk to your child and then talk to your doctor, because really a lot of these things are reflective of a medical issue. It may be an underlying depression or anxiety. It may be an underlying mental illness that they're trying to self-medicate. It may be they're using something else, may not be K2, it may be something else that's having a physical impact on their body. I think it's a really good idea, if you have any concerns, make an appointment with the doctor, take the child in, talk to the doctor about what your concerns are, and then leave the child alone with the doctor to be able to talk more freely without you there, and see if you can't come up with a good plan. Then to educate yourself, there are a lot of good websites. The Drug and Alcohol Consortium here in town has a great website that has a lot of information on it that can, you can become educated about the issue itself. But start off by getting a good independent assessment through your physician to kind of see if you have a better idea of what the real problems are.
And there's not a lot of collected scientific evidence about the effects of this. How would you respond to that, as far as, do you think that it's easy to say, well, it's not an issue, you don't have anything to back this up that it's bad, so how would you respond to that?
Well, I think that the reason people are using it in the first place is because it's having an impact, okay? And that really, to me, that doesn't matter if I have scientific evidence or not. If I know that someone has a developing brain and I know it's creating a euphoric state of being for them, then those other issues that we talked about are still going to be negatively impacted. I know that because they have a developing brain and they don't have the judgment. So the issues that I'm concerned about, I don't know that they're independent of the particular substance, they're just facts. So, I know that we don't have a wealth of information about the negative consequences of K2. We do know the long-term impact of cannabinoids. The thing is, if it's true for cannabinoids, it's going to be similar, at least, to the synthetic cannabinoids. And a lot of people say, well, you don't have a lot of long-term evidence. You have to remember there's not a whole lot of incentive to study long-term things that we know are bad for you in the short run. So, there's not a whole lot of impetus to do that. So there may likely never be long-term studies to look at the negative impact of K2. But we know right now it makes their heart rate increase. They have increased blood pressure. We know they're going to the emergency department because they're having a more extreme impact than just marijuana does in terms of the anxiety. It's not this mild, mellow high that I think a lot of people are thinking. For some people it may be, but for a lot of people what they're having is a lot of anxiety. They're having hallucinations. They're very agitated. They're frightened because they're feeling the physiologic changes in their bodies in terms of the heart rate and blood pressure. So it's not a particularly pleasant experience. Those negative consequences alone, coupled with the fact that I know their brain is vulnerable at this point, I don't need a lot of studies to tell me that this is bad.